Due to the graphic nature of the personal accounts and content discussed in this podcast, listener discretion is advised. Many episodes will include graphic personal accounts and discussions of child sexual assault, domestic violence, physical abuse, rape, sexual situations, and suicide.
Oh my child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Survivors. I'm your host, Sarah Austin. We're joined by Kendra today as well, another one of our fabulous hosts. I'm super excited for our episode today. I'm actually fangirling a little bit. Our guest today is Chris Davis. She's the author of the book that's titled Worthy, the Memoir of an Ex-Mormon Lesbian. I actually found her on TikTok. A video of hers came up on my For You page. That was one of those, it was talking about I am ex-Mormon because, and she talked about why she's ex-Mormon. And I don't want to go into her story because that's her story to tell, but what she had to say touched my heart so much because I related so much to it. It was like it could be my story as well. And so I kind of went through all of her TikToks and listened to her stories, and then I went and bought her book, and I'm almost done reading it, and it's fantastic. So I 100% recommend anyone listening to this go buy her book. It's absolutely worth the read. It's a fantastic story. And so, Chris, we're so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hand it over to you, and whatever's healing for you, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so flattered that you would give me such a great introduction. I'm so glad that we found each other. I'm thrilled to be on the podcast today. My book is Worthy, the Memoir of an Ex-Mormon Lesbian, and I can finally say that subtitle without tripping.
I was going to say that subtitle is a little hard to say, especially because I grew up with a stutter. As I've gotten older, it's gotten a lot better, but memoir is a really hard word when you have a stutter.
I should have considered that before I named my book.
It's all good.
So I thought I might talk a little bit about the structure of the book just in the beginning, just to give a little intro. It is a book that has some difficult subject matter, but also it has some humorous stories. What I did when I started writing it was that I just decided to write stream of consciousness and see what came out, because I wasn't accustomed to writing, and this is my first solo work, and I've written essays in the past, but this is my first book that's me all the way through. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to say yet or how I wanted to say it. And so I ended up with two separate books. And so I just combined them. The first half of each chapter tells a nostalgic story of growing up in Bangor, Maine, lots of times with my brother or with my grandmothers, or just different kind of happy, playful, a lot of times humorous stories that bring back nostalgia from the 70s and 80s. And then the second half of each chapter is a traumatic story from being in the church, from being queer and from being a woman in the church. And so what I do in each chapter is I develop a theme that runs through both halves of the chapter. And that's the title of the chapter.
Yeah,
So
and I've loved that in reading your book, how you have like such a neat like interesting story of your past, and then how you tie it into the church and into the trauma. And I thought it was very artistic the way you did that. I love
thank
that.
you. Thanks very much. I enjoyed actually the process of writing it, and I had a an editor that was just amazing. She was phenomenal, and she taught me better techniques on writing and how to develop things better, how to develop themes, how to, create transitions. And she made me a better writer. So your editor matters.
It's true.
um, but the cover of my book is very bright. It's a hand holding a ribbon that's floating up into the air, and the wrist of that hand has forget me not flowers on it that are being held to my wrist with a band aid.
Mm.
And I love it because it's cheerful. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a Mormon ad,
Mm-hmm.
but also there's a nod to trauma. So I think it fits my story perfectly.
I meant to have your book here with me and I forgot, so I had to text
Oh,
my girlfriend and say, "Hey, can you bring me that book?" Because
did
I
you?
took notes in it that I wanted to share.
Oh,
Sorry.
wonderful! I can't wait to hear about them. Okay,
Yes, I love the cover of your book.
thank you. I'm pretty happy with it too. I got a lot of choices on what to pick, and I liked that one the best. So it was nice. I thought maybe I would um, start. Can I just read the content warning for the book quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. This book, first of all, is not for children. I had uh, initially I had heard some mothers who were purchasing the book and handing it to their young adolescent girls, and it it concerns me because there is subject matter in here that needs to be discussed with an adult if a child
Yeah.
is reading it. So just that, and then my content warning in the book says, if topics of child sexual abuse, the death of loved ones, religious trauma, or the contemplation of suicide make you uncomfortable, please practice self-care while reading this book.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted that to be upfront.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I wrote an introduction, which please don't skip the introduction. It's not very long and it has some important information in there. I know I don't usually read the introduction of a book yet, but I'm letting you know it's important to the story.
I think Christina bought the book electronically, so we've kind of been sharing it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's free on Kindle Unlimited. I also put it out to the Mama Dragons for them to read ahead of time if they wanted to. So many of them took me up on that offer. So there may be digital
Good.
copies out there. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. I wanted to finish it before the interview today, but I'm a slow reader and I'm old, so I fall whenever I sit down to read, I typically fall asleep. But I've made it about three-quarters of the way through the book so far, and
Okay.
I love
What
it.
page are you on so I can know?
I am on page 109.
109. Okay. I will
Yeah.
not go beyond.
Well, you got to tell your story.
That's the best chapter in the whole
Is
book.
it?
Yes. It's the pivotal moment when I talk first about, it's called the fight of black belt proportions. I talk about my
Yeah.
experience in the martial arts, and then it's the
Mhm.
pivotal moment when my teenager comes out to me as gender queer,
Oh gosh.
and we have to deal with the bishop about it, and
Wow.
we come to the decision that we're not going to stick around.
Mm.
Well, now I'm super excited to read
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So
I've been excited to read it
yeah,
anyway, but yeah.
it's pretty impactful. I mean, I consider that the most pivotal chapter. So have fun and enjoy it, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it afterwards. I thought I might just start talking a little bit about my brother. He plays a
I just got to that, or I read that recently. I don't know if you're going to talk about him, the fact that he passed away, but that broke my heart. I was like, oh my goodness. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump forward in your story, but
no, it's good. It's good. I was I just wanted to emphasize, how close we were, and that I tell stories right in the beginning in the first chapter about just how passive he was and what a great guy he was, and as a kid, and how mean I was to him as a big sister, but
Oh.
also just that we had this this communication that was exclusive to us, and we would just drop into that jargon when we got together, and so it's really special for me to have written about him and share him with the world. This first chapter is called "Cold Baths All My Life" because when he was in elementary school, he was very young. I can't remember what grade it was, like second grade or something, but he was told to do an assignment at school, and he was supposed to complain about something in some way, like, what upsets you or what disturbs you. And he titled it Cold Baths All My Life. Apparently, I remember this. I would go first in the bathtub, and these were the old days. We didn't empty out the tub and fill it up. We just used we used the same water, and so he would go in after me, and the water apparently was always cold.
Oh.
But this boy, he never complained. Like, he just did it. He just took it. He just endured it, and we had no idea until this assignment came home from school. My mom read it, and she was like, "Oh my god, I didn't realize." Well, she said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I that I was traumatizing my boy." So that is the first half of that chapter, and in the second half of the chapter, I relate that title of his work, of his schoolwork, to stepping into the baptismal font,
Mm.
the tepid water. My
Mm.
baptism was something that I did not consent to. I was 9 years old. My parents were recently divorced, and um, my mom had full custody, and so she decided that it was time for me to be baptized. I had my bishop's interview alone with the bishop at 9 years old in his office, and he asked me if I wanted to be baptized. And my father, who is not a member of the church, has never been, and is a little bit, um, doesn't really like the church. And so he told me what to tell the bishop if I was ever asked this question. And so I
Mm.
said it to the bishop. I said, "I'd like to wait until I'm 16 so that I'm older and can make a better decision." And the bishop was surprised by this response
Mm.
because he had been told, my mother brought me in for the interview. So, he talked about, what baptism was a little bit, and he said, "But you like it when you come here, right, to church?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's good." And he said, "And you want to be baptized at some point, right?" And I said, "Well, probably, yeah, yeah." And so he took that as my yes. And a few weeks later, we were in the car driving, and my mom informs me that we are on our way to my baptism.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I did not know what that involved. I didn't know, I didn't have any idea the commitment that I was making. I showed up, they told me to put on this starch white dress, and you know, I I I stepped up to the font like okay, so a girl, there were 3 of us there that day, and a girl went before me to get baptized, and
Yeah.
they opened this curtain, and there was like a bathtub in the church, which I didn't even know about. And so this girl walks down the little steps on the girl's side, and then on the boys' side, her father walks into the font, and he says a prayer, and he dunks her under the water. I was like, "What is going on here?" And then they say, "Okay, it's your turn."
Oh my gosh.
And so I did. I stepped into that font, and it was warm, but not warm enough, and it was tepid, and I related back to the "cold baths all my life" statement that my brother
Mm.
had made.
Yeah.
On the other side of the font was a man who was our home teacher. Uh, he was one of my mom's friends, and I knew who he was, but I didn't know anything about him baptizing, and even maybe I should I say this? Yeah. He said, he asked my mom, so who's going to confirm her? And she said, well, I was thinking maybe you could do it, because they used to do it right there at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was surprised by that. So I got confirmed, but it was a surprise for us all.
Hmm. It kind of reminds me of the temple. Like we're conditioned from the time we're young to not expect an explanation or an understanding of what decisions we're making for baptism, for getting the priesthood for men, for going to the Relief Society, from going to young women activities. We just go. We just go and we do as the Lord commands, right? We go and
Hmm.
we do
Mission
whatever we're
two.
told. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you go to
Mission
the
two. Yeah.
temple. Did you go to the temple?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you go to the temple, right, you don't have the temple prep classes don't tell you anything about anything
No.
that you are going to hear in there or commit to.
They don't. They don't
So,
prepare you.
yeah, it just like just listening to that part of your story, I just makes me think of the temple.
It is. And the hardest part about this baptism that was not consensual was that it was thrown in my face for the rest of my life that I
Mm,
had made promises at my baptism that were
mm,
committing me for the rest of eternity.
yep,
And it's so frustrating that I had no idea, like so many of us, usually kids are baptized at 8.
yep.
Even an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old has no idea what it means
No.
to commit their eternity to a church.
No, they don't. And that's one thing that I used to think, it was one of those things that I thought was good about the church, of course, when I was in the church, because so many churches do baptisms when they're babies, when they're infants.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, our church doesn't do that. Our church waits till they're 8 years old and they can make their own decision.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know any 8-year-old that understands what they're doing.
No. And
It's
they call it,
impossible to comprehend.
yeah, they call it the age of accountability, right? But it's
Yeah.
not the age of consent. It's not the age of consent. That
Ooh,
doesn't
I
mean
like that.
accountability means, yes, they know right from wrong, but it does not mean that they are able to sign a contract.
Wow, that is so impactful. I love how you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it continued,
Hmm.
through my young adulthood. Um, I was a faithful seminary student, and I graduated from all 4 years of early morning seminary. Before that, though, I was baptized at 9, and my mother got married, remarried at when I was 10.
Yeah.
When I was 11, I was sexually abused by this man. And then at 13, I finally got up the courage and the recognition that something was wrong, and went to my young women's leader. And she stopped me and told me that I needed to go talk to the bishop because he would know what to do. And the bishop did nothing. He asked me detailed questions. And then he told me because my stepfather had been baptized between the time that it occurred and the time that I told him about it, he was not accountable. He was free of any
Wow.
kind of responsibility or accountability. And so I was told that I needed to just not ever think about it again and move on with my life. I was 13.
Wow.
That makes me so mad. When I was
I
reading that in your book, and then I'm sure you're going to go on from there. Like I had like the ragey, like you talked about the disclaimer at the beginning of your book. That was a time that I had to put down the book and walk away because like it
Mm,
was, oh, it hurt my heart. Like because to get up the courage to even tell, at 13, 14, 15, whatever,
exactly.
to get up the courage, and then to get up the courage to tell the young women's, and then tell the bishop's scary. Like, and
Yeah.
then and to just be quieted. Oh, that
yeah.
breaks my heart. That made me so angry.
I can relate deeply to your story because it sounds a lot like mine. My stepfather abused me. And around the age of 13, I told my mom I remember telling her, explicitly what had happened, and at first she didn't believe me, but the way that it has been handled since then, um, there's a lot of similarities. So,
Mm, I'm
and I
so
and I
sorry.
think I think that's the point though of our podcast though, is really that we all have experienced similar things. Not that our stories are comparable, but we've all experienced some similar things or had similar responses to what we've experienced, which re-traumatizes us. Which then later on we realize, okay, well, I was quiet all this time because I was told that was the right thing to do, and now it makes me rage. It makes me really angry. And I like the term sacred rage, because I do have the right to be
Oh,
angry, and you do have the right to be angry. And we do need to bring awareness to this pattern of behavior within the church, that even though they try to claim that it's not doctrine, it's a pattern that is so consistent across wards, across countries, across, you know, every aspect of socioeconomic status. It is not just Mormonism. I agree. People will say that, but our stories become so similar that they can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You know.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I applaud the efforts of Sam Young, who has brought so much attention to this issue and has been a champion for the survivors. I really admire that and appreciate it very much for him to be a voice for us, with
Yeah.
us.
Sam Young was my biggest shelf breaker, if we're talking about shelf breakers at all, because um, it happened actually long before I lost my faith in the church, but I had never heard of Sam Young. And
Mhm.
then when I started questioning a couple years ago, when I started questioning the church, I listened to one podcast and they mentioned Sam Young. And I was like, who's Sam Young? So I looked up his website. The minute I was on that website, I was done with the church, because there were so many
Wow.
stories, story after story after story of bishops and stake presidents abusing children and getting away with it, and
Hmm.
not being accountable. And it was like, that this church is not from God. Yeah.
It's it's so disturbing, right? Because you think this is your source of divinity and truth from the universe,
Mhm.
and it turns out to be a dirty organization with dirty
Yeah.
secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I regret about that bishop's talk that I had was that he did not tell me that we needed to tell my mother. He did not tell me that we needed to report it to the police. He
Yeah.
did not inform me of any counseling opportunities. He did not tell me about the statute of limitations. There was no discussion. It was just, you need to not ever say this again. And I felt silenced and I felt stupid for going to talk to him, because how did that benefit me at all?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I actually escalated. A couple, no, maybe a year later, maybe 2 years later, I uh, had a seminary teacher who was the stake president. And we became friends because, close, because we saw each other every morning and we joked around a lot. And so I went to him because my mother and her husband were preparing to go to the temple for the first time, for his first time, and they were going to be sealed. I was not invited. My brother was not invited, but they were going to go and make their marriage eternal. And I understood that my stepfather would have to have an interview with this man before he could be allowed to have a temple recommend. And so I talked to the stake president just in an attempt to try to get some kind of um, support and accountability for this, what this man did. And the stake president apologized for how it had been swept under the rug in the past, and promised to address it, and promised to meet with me regularly to try to help me. And so I guess he must have talked to my stepfather, because I was practicing the piano. I was 14, 15. I was practicing the piano in the living room, and he walked into the room behind me and said, "You know, that stuff that happened before? Well, I'm sorry." And then he continued walking through the room to the other side of the room and left the room with me sitting there at the piano going, "What the hell was that?" That
Yeah.
was his accountability. he was allowed to go to the temple after that. The stake president never met with me again, never spoke to me about it again. And not only was he allowed to go to the temple and be sealed to my mother, but when he returned, he was given a position of leadership in the ward.
Yeah.
And so I recognized what this was, and that it was that the predators are protected
Mm-hmm.
and even rewarded,
Mm-hmm.
and the victims are silenced. It
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
terrible realization.
Yeah.
So as you've been talking, I had kind of let's call it an epiphany. Um, what we were talking about earlier with the way that the church brushes things under the rug with the age of consent, with not, so it brings me into the idea of we were thrown into positions as a volunteer position, as a calling, never having any training to do those positions. We when we go into those positions, we figure it out or we completely flop and don't do a good job, right? And so the whole idea is magnify your calling, but magnify your calling within the confines of what the church tells you is magnifying that calling. But the thing is that bishops don't have training. And I think, just listening to this, they don't have training or understanding on how to be a counselor. They don't have training or understanding on trauma. And so when they're called to this position, they think that their discernment is enough. And their discernment is not informed because there is no information given to them to be able to handle such a thing. It makes them uncomfortable. So when they're given an out by the church, when the church says, um, you know, you don't need to report this. So they call Curtin and McConkey, the hotline, whatever, and they're like, you don't need to report this. They're basically the risk management of the company, where they're saying, hey, don't report this. We'll deal with the consequences later. If this person ever comes to a point where they can get clarity and actually see this for what it is, they think they're going to deal with it later. They're counting on our ignorance. They're counting on on us being, I've heard the term saying infantile state. They're counting on us being submissive and being obedient. So this theme, it starts from the time that we're in primary.
It sure does.
They're teaching us that we give everything that we have and we don't expect anything in return.
Yeah.
Exactly. But at
And
the same time, we're taught to turn to these men. We're taught that they will have the answers from God, that they are our spiritual conduit to heaven, and that they will give us the answers that we need. And even that we should trust their advice over any other kind of professional.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's dangerous. That's what it is. It's dangerous.
Absolutely. Let me
And
see.
far too
Oh,
common.
far too common. Far
I
too common.
I don't want to, if you're not to this point yet,
Tell
were
me.
you going to talk about how when you told your mom about the abuse, or were you
Um,
not to that yet?
I'm trying not to diss my mom on social media.
Okay, I get that, and I can take that out that I said that, but
No, it's okay. It's just that she is still very much alive and still a faithful member of the church, and she is doing what she believes is best. And I cannot fault her for that because I've been in her situation. I understand
yeah,
it. I have compassion for it, even though it does not turn out in my favor sometimes. I think that in her way, she is showing her devotion to the church. She did. She did not believe me.
Yeah.
When I came out. I will go ahead and say it. She just said that the day was going to come when I would grow up and move away, and all she would have left is her children, is her husband. All she would
Mm.
have left was this man to live with, and so she needed to stick by him. It doesn't feel
Oh,
good. It doesn't feel good as a teenager to hear that when
you
I
No,
know,
finally get up the courage to tell her.
yeah.
Yeah.
no.
So,
And that was one point that I had to put down the book and walk away, because I think I told you on our TikTok chat that is one thing that I struggle with my mom. Like my whole life, my mom was an angel. Like she always did everything right. It was to the church. She's still, everything to the church. She's very faithful member. But then I didn't find out until I started digging into all this, and after I did my episode, when I felt like to heal, I needed more of the story, because when I was a kid, I only had my little slice of the story. But, I expected that my dad had been guilty of more than I knew. And so I started asking around, and I found out like um, there was someone else, actually, at least two girls that he either, made suggestive comments towards or actually touched or whatever. Both of them went to my mom and told her, and but she didn't believe either of them.
oh my
and
word.
and that was just two. I'm like, there's probably more, but
Yeah.
I to know that my mom knew, even if she didn't know about my portion of it, to know that my mom knew that he was dangerous and
Mhm.
didn't believe anyone, especially
Wow.
because my mom grew up with sexual abuse like that.
Oh,
I mean, my
wow.
mom, yeah, and then the fact that she didn't believe,
Yeah.
you know
Oh my
it just
gosh.
blows my mind.
Yeah, we weren't informed. And here I thought that Oprah had like in the 80s had taught us all that this was not okay and
Mhm.
kind of shone a light into the dark corners and that it wasn't going to happen again, but um here we are, 2023, and it still happens.
Yeah,
And mothers are still responding in this way.
yeah,
Yeah. I think there's an awakening though, you know. I think
Yes.
also I think a lot more people are finding their voice. Um because I think also when we're little and when we're in the church and our parents are supposed to be like perfect, right? They're supposed to be like the example that we're following. If our parents tell us that that's how it needs to be, we trust them. But the reality is that our parents are just as damaged as we are,
Mm.
you know? They're just they, they have their story may be different, but your mom grasping, was it your mom that said that she wanted to, that you guys were going to leave the nest, right? And
Yeah.
that she was going to be left with this person.
Hmm.
That person in your mom's eyes, I'm assuming, is better than being alone.
Yes.
And overlooking those faults is something that the church has taught us all to do.
Wow.
I think it might have been Esther's interview
Mhm.
that you guys did, where she said, and I'm not quoting this directly, but what I remember, it struck me. It was something like, children who are taught to sweep things under the rug become adults who live there.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yep.
Wow.
And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, they don't ever coming out into the light, actually facing everything, actually doing that inner child work is something that is terribly hard and extremely rewarding. But the terribly hard is the part that people avoid because it's scary and because it means there's going to be lots of dark nights of the soul. And it means I'm going to have to face all of the dark parts of myself. It means that I'm going to have to face all the dark parts of the other people that have been in my life. Um, and so I don't know exactly where I was going with that. I think the ADD meds haven't really kicked
I
in.
have a comment on it. That
Yeah,
I
please.
I felt like I couldn't go ahead and look into those dark corners
Mhm,
and really examine the truth of the situation I was in until I had a community that would
mhm.
support me outside of the church.
Yeah.
yeah,
I felt like I could not do that as a standalone individual. I didn't have the
Mhm.
strength, I didn't have the support, I didn't even know where to look.
Yeah.
But once I found a community that was also questioning, it made me feel like I could it gave me the courage to do it.
Yeah. And you can talk about anything, right? You're in the church, you're restricted. I can
Right.
talk about these things and maybe I'll push the limit a little bit and talk about things up to a certain point, but eventually it's going to get shut down, right? Where I was going with what I was saying before I remembered, is that my mom, when I've told her about the inner child work, when I've told her about doing EMDR, which is the eye movement desensitization reprocessing, when I've told her about seeing a counselor, she's said to me, and I don't remember if these are exact words, but that it is too hard for her at this stage of her life, that she's too old and she would rather just not deal with it.
Wow.
And I can give her grace for that because she feels like she's in a good place. What I feel sad about is that she's not, if she decides to do that, where she takes that to her grave and never deals with it, how how has she been able to really become this person that she's meant to be in this life? How does she
Mm.
even know who she is if she doesn't deal with the past?
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That's so powerful.
I'm a completely different person now than I was 10 years ago, than I was 5 years ago, than I was 2 years ago. And it all has to do with not staying stagnant, not staying in one place and not doing things out of fear.
Right.
So being in the church means I do everything out of fear, or I don't do things out of fear.
Right.
So the people that are in there are still stuck. And so I have compassion and empathy for them. And I really hope that they will wake up. I hope
I
that they
feel
will
the
do that
same.
work.
I
So,
feel the same about my family members, including my mother. Like
yeah,
she's stuck.
yeah.
Family members, all of any of my family members who are still in the church, I feel like I would like for them to maybe, open their minds a little bit or open their hearts, but I understand why they can't. We've been there.
It's scary. It's
Yeah.
scary because once you open that door, it's hard to close.
It's impossible for me. It was impossible for
Impossible.
me to close
Yeah,
it. Can
definitely.
I tell you about a year before my teen came out? I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I'm wondering if I should wait. Nah, I'll go ahead and say it now. Uh, a year before my teen came out, I started looking at outside resources for truth. I'm actually releasing a blog post next weekend about this day I stopped believing. But the thing is that I went into this extracurricular study with the intention of proving that the church was true, or proving, and seeing, is this the source of divine guidance and and light that I think it is, or am I being duped? And so, I went into with the intention of fortifying my faith, and, I just learned basically that I didn't need a gatekeeper for my spirituality and that I could have
Yeah.
direct access to whatever spirituality I chose. It was very enlightening. I I I had a couple of study buddies, from the church, women in the church. We met, uh, uh at Starbucks because we knew it was where nobody we knew would run into us or see us together. And so we would meet and we would talk about these books that we were reading and podcasts that we were listening to and just all this flood of information that we were trying to process, and we were like trying to understand it and trying to put it into the context of our belief in the church, and it just wouldn't fit. And
Yeah.
so we had some choices to make, and it was a time of exploration. And so by the time my child came out, uh, a year later, I already had one foot out the door. And so it was so easy to just say, "We're out of here,"
Hmm.
Yeah.
and to protect him, them. I call him him now.
He's lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm lucky to
Yeah.
have him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Many parents are not supportive, and
Yeah.
it actually breaks my heart a little bit because around the time that I was gearing up to leave the church, and I was becoming more, understanding and compassionate towards trans individuals and people struggling in any way with the church, the square pegs in the round hole, the ones that didn't fit in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Around that time, my daughter told me that one of her friends in the church came out to her as trans, but
Mm-hmm.
his parents would never, would never listen, would never be there. And so now, I'm 2 years out of the church. I haven't been there, but every now and then they pop up on my Facebook feed, like, because I'm friends with their mom, and I always wonder, like, how are they doing? Like, what a struggle, because they knew that they would never have support from their parents. And
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that your child had a supportive mother, that's amazing.
It was born out of desperation. I have to be honest that I had been closeted for my whole life, and I had a traumatic experience in 2003. My brother did pass away, and it made me reevaluate everything. And at that time, I was 32 years old, and I came out to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to decide what that meant because I had a very new young family. Uh, I had been married for 7 years and I had two small children, and I recognized that I had made a terrible mess, a terrible mistake. But I took seriously the commitment I had made to raise these children, and so I did that. But with the plan that after they were raised to adulthood, that I would be free to take my own life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just did not I could not be a queer member of the church. It hurt too much, but I endured it so that I could, make sure that my children had a mother throughout their childhood. And then I felt like I would be free to go ahead and do what I needed to do. Forgot where I was going with that.
Mm-hmm.
One
Uh,
thing I was trying to find this in your book. It was one thing that I didn't underline that I wish that I had. And I remember the quote, but I don't remember where it is. And I think it's in the introduction, but you had said something like, you had a husband, you had these beautiful kids, you had this beautiful life, were an upstanding member of the church, you had all of these beautiful things within your life, and you said, but it wasn't my life. you
yes.
know
Yeah.
I had this beautiful life, but it wasn't mine. And when I read that, I want to say it's within the first couple pages, but
Yeah.
when I read that, I put the book down and I turned to my girlfriend and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I could say that same thing, like, had this beautiful life, but it wasn't mine. So I wasn't
Exactly.
happy. It wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right in the introduction. Actually, I do remember where I was going with that now because when my teen came out to me, it, as genderqueer. They weren't sure what they were yet, but they knew they weren't straight. And I, um, I had been closeted my whole life, as I said. And so, in that same conversation, when he came out to me, I came out to him
Mm-hmm.
as a closeted lesbian, which shocked him because he said it was. He was concerned about coming out to me because he knew I was so religious. And to think that keeping him in the church, even though it was against what was in my best interest, to know that that made it more difficult for him to come out to me just
Mm-hmm.
broke my heart.
Yeah.
And the thing is that once he came out, he made a YouTube for his followers and just said, this is me, I'm changing, whatever. And then the bishop caught wind of it and brought us in to manage expectations early. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had been used to hearing the anti-queer rhetoric my whole life. I had internalized all the appropriate homophobia, and I had I hated my life. I hated living, I hated being who I was, but I was trying my best to make it work. But when they started aiming that talk at my child,
Mm-hmm.
I lost it. Like, I stood up to the bishop and I questioned his counsel, and after 3 appointments with the bishop, I took my kid out, and not only that, but I called my bishop a prick.
Good.
which was so empowering. It was so like I claimed myself in that moment, and I was just like, you don't have any control over me. I don't recognize your authority anymore. There is nothing you can do to convince me that this is okay. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
knew I needed to protect my kid.
Yeah.
So I did.
I think that was one of the most empowering things for me, was realizing that no member of the church, regardless of their stature, regardless of their status, has any power over me. None of it is real. It is all power that we give to them because we allow them to have that power over us, because we go to the bishop and we confess our sins, because we talk to the Relief Society president, because we have our visiting teachers come over and learn things about us and then take it to the ward council if it's concerning. All of these things are things that we allow, but what we've been sorry but we've been taught that we have to, like, these are expected um, processes that we go through to be able to be upstanding members of the church, or to know that we are upstanding members of the church. It's 100% brainwashing. 100%.
It is. We're taught that we have common consent. We're taught that we have the ability to consent, but we are told how to consent, and
Hmm.
we are informed that we are not allowed not to consent.
Yeah.
It's taken away from us, even though they tell us that we still have it, because we're not allowed to say no to a calling. We're
Hmm.
not allowed to, make our own choices in so many instances, but we trick ourselves into thinking that we are making this choice,
Yeah.
and it is simply
Yeah.
not true.
Well, when you can teach a person, you can gaslight a person to a point where they can gaslight themselves, then you own them.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have power over them, because we're all going to question our own thoughts and intuition and beliefs. If you can get a person internally conflicted with themselves, then externally they're going to turn to you. That's the whole point of religion. That's the business model, as Christina would say. It's a brilliant business model. Give us your money so you'll be worthy. Come and talk to us and tell us all your problems, so we'll have ammo against you. So we'll have something to use against you and make you quiet. And continue doing this. Wash, rinse, repeat. Come to church every Sunday and re-indoctrinate yourself every Sunday. It's not it's not reaffirm your faith, by taking the sacrament again, and renew your covenants that you never consented to begin with. It is you coming in and basically saying, I'm still yours. You still own
Yeah.
me. And
Wow.
I'm
Yep.
proving that every time I walk into that building.
Wow.
Yeah. One thing, when I first lost my faith in the church, I was talking to a friend of mine who had already left the church, which I think you had talked about, Chris, how wonderful it was to have a support system
Yes.
and that sounding board. And I remember when I first lost my faith, I was terrified because it's something your whole life, and you know everything, all the answers, the before, the during, the after, and then once you lose that, there's that terrifying, it's that existential crisis. I think that's why they call it that faith crisis. um, I was terrified. I knew nothing, and I told my friend, I was like, I don't know how to raise my kids outside of the church.
Mm.
Like, I was so worried about my kids while I didn't believe in the church. Yeah, while I didn't believe in the church, I didn't know how to raise my kids outside of the church. And she said, good people exist outside of the church.
Oh,
And as obvious as that was, that's what I needed to hear.
Mhm.
And she was like, she told me, she's like, I'm a better mother now. My kids are happier. Everything's been better since I left the church. And now that I'm 2 years doing whatever years out, I can say the same.
Mhm.
I'm happier, I'm more relaxed, I'm a better mother, I'm, more open with my kids, and I feel like my kids are happier too.
I love that.
But yeah, there's that moment of, I don't know what, how to raise my kids outside of the church because they owned me.
Because the church teaches you need them for that. Yeah. We put our trust in that. And I remember my patriarchal blessing being a huge influence on all of my life decisions. I actually included the blessing in the book in its entirety. And
Yeah, and I loved that. I thought that that added a lot to the book. I loved that you put the whole thing in there. I thought that was fantastic.
thank you. I was worried about, it's a little bit dry reading, but it's important information. And I talked to a friend of mine who has also left the church, who got her blessing about the same time from the same man. And she said it's almost word for word the same,
Yeah.
which I thought it was so personal to me. I thought this is a direct message from God. Of course I need to obey this. I need to consult this document in all my decisions, and I need to make sure that my life is aligning with what God told me when I was 17.
Well, why do we think that they're all the same?
And it was fake.
You know, they are. They all have the same structure. They all have a lot of the same information, but the majority of the information is church affirming. The
Yeah.
majority of the information, I mean, it's all going to be church affirming, but
Oh, yes.
it's to force you to realize that your life is supposed to be a part of this church. That you affirm that you're owned by the church again by reading that document over and over again, and trying to find the answers in it that you seek, like reading the Book of Mormon, like saying your prayers. You're we've learned, I believe, to separate ourselves so far from our own intuition and give credit to something outside of ourselves that we don't even know who we are. We don't even know how to make decisions, like like Sarah was saying, how to be a parent, because there's this guideline. There's this whole structure of how to raise your children. And outside of that, how do you make decisions? How do you do those things when you don't have that patriarchal blessing? When you don't have that manual of how to raise your children?
Right.
When you don't have family home evening, which doesn't really help you to get closer to your kids at all. When you have to read
No.
scriptures. Yes.
And
It's a lot of
yelling.
scrambling and punishing and, yeah, threatening. Yeah.
And taking your kids to church every Sunday,
Yeah.
like, for me, it was a screaming fest. It
Yeah.
was, "Get your
What?
clothes on, we gotta go to church, wake up," right? And we're all, like, trying to get out the door. By the time we get there, I'm
Right.
so angry. How do I feel the spirit? How do I even know what the spirit is? I'm so angry. It's,
What do you mean you can't find your church shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, exactly. Go
Yeah,
barefoot.
right.
But then they don't look perfect. You show up to church, your kids are in their
Mhm.
pajamas,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't
Right.
happen. So we all kill ourselves to make ourselves
Yeah.
appear as though we actually have it all together.
It's all image, yes, and
Mhm.
our children's behavior and their appearance is a reflection on our ability as a parent, right?
That's actually one thing
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
did have underlined in your book. I hope I'm not jumping forward too much, but at
Go
one
ahead.
point you talk about how much of the church was all show. It was all show. And you said, I'm going to read it because I just thought it was worded so well. You said, so much show, no substance. In the end, keeping the covenants and obeying the words of the prophets left me feeling empty and depleted because my life's work was founded on busy work and distraction. It was a spiritual sleight of hand to keep me engaged, but not thinking and feeling for myself.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
deep.
It hits hard, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Uh-huh.
I know. It was hard to write. A lot of this is still hard for me to read, even though I've read it through a few times.
Yeah.
It's
It's
more than a
very
few.
validating,
Thank you.
honestly. Like, for anyone who reads through your story, they're going to feel validated. They're going to feel like, "Oh my gosh, I felt that way too. Oh my gosh, these are things that I can absolutely relate to."
I've heard a lot of it.
Not
I just got an email this morning from my website of somebody saying
Mhm.
that exact thing. Like, your
Yeah.
story is my story,
Yeah.
and just thank you so much for being so vulnerable. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a lot of us out there,
Mhm. They absolutely are.
and we felt so alone for so long, right?
We
Yeah.
did. Well,
Yeah.
the silence makes us alone, makes us dependent on the church, right?
Yeah.
And finding our voice helps us find other people like us. and
Yes.
then we're no longer dependent on the church. That's why they wanted us to be silent. At least that's one reason.
It is. I have an experience that I'm just this blog post that's coming out next weekend called The Day I Stopped Believing. I talk about an experience in my late 30s. I was a grown woman, I was a parent, I was a wife, I was a by all rights an adult, late 30s, and I asked a question in Relief Society, a doctrinal question that I'd been struggling with for a while, and I couldn't find the answers in anywhere else. And so I asked in Relief Society. I don't recall what the question was, but as soon as it came out of my mouth, the whole room like the shifted and shushed me, and they used their how did I put it? They used their social pressure to silence me. And the teacher instructed me to take this question and put it on my shelf in the closet and close the door, and that one day I would get my answer, but that I didn't need to concern myself with it until then. And
Yeah.
that was, that was another addition to my shelf. But it's very much social pressure to keep quiet and not question
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. Well, and especially not question things publicly,
Yeah.
right? You ask a question in Relief Society. So near the end of my time in the church, I was a Relief Society teacher. And because my profession is in the medical profession, I I tend to want to kind of see things through that lens, but also to help people to understand their health. I started talking to them about dopamine and the Holy Ghost, and how you can't really feel the Holy Ghost if you're depressed. And so I was still kind of in, right? I was still feeling like I needed to explain things to myself and other people, but there were a lot of things I didn't agree with. And depression in the church is just something that's not accepted because, you power through, right? You still you still keep up appearances, you still show up, you still do all these things, and in a way I guess that's kind of good, right? Because you're getting out of the house, I'm trying to
Yeah.
see the good, right? But the reality is, like, um systemically, psychologically, you can't feel the Holy Ghost if you're depressed. You can't have you don't have that warm fuzzy, and I'm saying the Holy Ghost, but I'm really, nowadays I talk about like my inner knowing, my intuition. When dopamine is low, it's really hard to have any kind of affirming feeling like you're validated, feeling like you have the answers, those things. So I taught lessons about dopamine and the Holy Ghost
I love that.
as I was leaving.
And we're always taught in the church too that this is the greatest source of happiness that there is, joy even, and that if we're not feeling happy, then we're not living the gospel well enough,
Right.
and we need to double down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
That
my intention in doing that lesson was so that people would have compassion for other people who maybe are not so they're not so good at keeping up appearances.
mm,
You know,
that was a gift you gave them, I think.
I hope so. I really hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind. I was a young women's president close to the end, and I really struggled with what I needed to teach these girls and what kind of message I wanted them to receive from their young woman leader. And I made sure to say things like, well, if you choose to get married, then this is how this works, and I would just subtly like introduce a little doubt or whatever, and be like, well, if you're blessed with children, or if you choose to have children, and it was
Mhm.
controversial, but I wanted these girls to hear it. I wanted
Yeah.
them to know that there are alternatives and that their life is not prescribed. I wanted them
Mhm.
to feel like they had a choice.
That just those words are a gift, honestly. Cuz choice, like we have all these songs about choice, right? Choose you this day who you'll serve. There's all songs, there's things that you say, but really is there a choice? Like, there's a prescribed path. I'm supposed to, be born, be blessed, be baptized, be, a faithful member of the church, get married in the temple,
Have
and then
kids.
have 5,000 children, and then go to the celestial kingdom, and then bear 5 million more, right?
Yeah.
So that's my prescribed path. Is there really a choice?
No.
Like, you gave them those words, just that little seed of saying, you have a choice. You don't have to get married. You don't have to have children.
I'm happy to report that several of them have come out since
Oh, wow.
then.
That's
It's
awesome.
well, that's the whole choice thing is just like getting baptized at 8 years old. Like you're giving your 8 year old the choice. Look, you can choose to be baptized and have a party and have all these people give
Yes.
you presents, or you can choose to disappoint your parents. Which choice are you going to make?
Yeah.
You
And
know, like,
disappoint Heavenly Father.
right,
Yeah. And your parents are going to nag you until you do get baptized.
right.
And all your friends are going to say, "Why aren't you getting baptized?" And your
Yeah,
grandparents are going to say, "We want to come to your baptism. When is it?"
yeah.
Lots of
But
pressure.
they choose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think, like, just thinking about that choice thing, I don't think that I really separated myself from what I knew that my mom would think of me until much later in life. So if and this may need to be edited out, but just that we don't really have our own sense of self and what we actually want until later in life. If we've already been married by the time I was 19 when I got married, if we're already married and then we have children by the time we actually figure life out, we are also again stuck. Like what you were saying, Chris, what you were saying about, you had your children, you wanted them to have a mother through their childhood, but then you were free to do what you needed to do for yourself. And what that looked like for you was not like a longevity in life and happiness. It was, I will fulfill my expectations and make sure my children are safe. But then once I get to the point where I'm not needed anymore, then that's it. There's nothing else after that.
Right, because wife and mother is the fulfillment of your eternal destiny, right?
Right. Well, wife and mother is your identity. You're in the church, that's the identity of women. We're expected to be a wife and a mother. We lose ourselves in the service of others, right? We lose
Yes.
ourselves when we become mothers. And I think the church really wants that. They want us to lose our identity.
I
Yeah.
completely concur. That is so accurate. That rings so true with me.
I said some things about like my mom when I was in the church still. I didn't really say them out loud, but I thought them. I thought the same thing about my kids. When my mom dies, then I'll be able to make these choices, right?
Yes.
When my mom
Yes.
dies, I can, because I don't want to hurt my mom.
Right.
I don't want to disappoint her. I don't think we realize the resilience of both our parents and our children when they see that we're actually happy, when they see that we're actually living our best life. That's what we want for our kids as parents, right? We want them to
Right.
be happy.
Right.
My mom, I'm sure, just wanted me to be happy. I think that that's something that we probably need to, anyway, we probably need to think more about. But anyway, I'm just rambling. I don't think my meds are working.
No, I think no, I completely agree. In fact, I did want to address a little bit about the relationship that my mom and I have now.
Mhm.
We seem to have come to a place where we are practicing some selective amnesia, and we just meet each other where we are.
Yeah,
And we get together and we play cribbage and we
I love it.
cook together and we watch Netflix and we just don't talk about a lot of the other stuff that's so controversial. Although sometimes we brush up against it, we quickly move away. But the
Mhm.
point is that she is in a difficult position, in a dilemma, and I am in a difficult position. I'm in a dilemma, and so I want to share who I am with her, but it
Mhm.
doesn't jive with her theology and her
Yeah.
morality. And so we do struggle with that. However, I will give her total props and credit for making an attempt to show me love despite the
Mhm.
fact that she can't support me. And
Mhm.
she has been so kind to my partner. She has just made sure to tell me how proud she is of me, and just how much she does love me,
Mhm.
in whatever way that she can. She is showing up for me in that way. So I have to say that there is definitely some maturity happening on both sides of the relationship, and I'm very happy to have what I have with her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I'm
You-
actually going to see my mom today.
Are you?
Yeah. Well, she's picking me up from the airport because that's where my son is down in St. George. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Nice. And you just said that she had left the church now too, or no?
No.
Oh, hasn't.
No.
Oh.
So I'm going to go stay with her.
Oh, are you going to church on Sunday?
No.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sure she'll invite me to go,
I'm sure she will.
and I will politely say, I think I'm gonna go to get coffee and maybe go to the bar, you
Yeah.
know? Join me afterwards.
My son and I, when he came out and we left the church, we would go to Panera on Sunday mornings, and
Nice.
we would toast to our leaving the church and bear our testimonies to one another about how happy we were that we had left the church. And we would like drink the sweet tea and the milky white coffee, trying to learn how to drink these things, and just it was so affirming and so
Oh,
community building just between the two of us, and so supportive. But yeah, I think you have to replace some of the rituals, and Sunday mornings are definitely for coffee and scones.
Yep.
yeah.
And sleeping. Good
And
God.
sleeping.
Rest.
Right.
Rest is so
Yeah,
important.
now it's a day of rest, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is. It really is a day of rest. In the
Yeah.
Mormon church, it's not a day of rest.
It is
No.
not. It's the most stressful day of the week.
Yeah.
So tell us more about kind of where you are now, and like what things that you're doing.
So, I did want to just talk about how I changed from being wanting to unalive myself to going ahead with
Oh yeah.
uh, furthering my aspirations and my goals and my intentions. So,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
had a friend who was learning how to be a life coach, and she needed to get certified. And in order to certify, she had to practice on someone. And so
Practice coach me.
I was I was about at the end. I was close to being an empty nester. And I was a good friend, and I was like, sure, you could practice on me. And so she did all the assessments, and we made all the plans and the goals, and she was just laying it all out for me. Like, here's what we're gonna do next, and this is so exciting. And I was like, yeah, thank you so much for all this, but I'm not ever gonna do any of this. And she was a good friend. She had known me for more than 10 years, and she said, what do you mean by that?" And I revealed my plan to finish raising my children and then not be here anymore. And she was so compassionate, and she
Mm,
heard me, and she said, "What if there are a few more chapters left in your life that can
I
be
love
filled
that.
with hope and possibility,
And happiness, true happiness, right?
happiness?" And
You,
so
by the way, you look very happy.
I am so happy now.
You look like a very happy person. Like the whole time we've been doing this interview, you've had this massive smile on your face, and it's just like every time I see it, it just makes me want to smile.
I thank you. I have a lot to smile about now.
Yeah, I love it on TikTok. Whenever one of your videos pops up, it always starts with you smiling, and you're like, "Hi, folks," and it's just so happy. It always makes me
I love
smile.
it. Yeah.
I love it.
It's nice to feel that way. It's nice to be out from under that rock. It really feels. I describe it even in the book as like holding a beach ball under the water for so
Mhm.
long, and then finally releasing it, and it just flies in the air, and I just feel like this freedom and this just lift, and this
I
I
can
just feel
breathe.
so I can breathe, I can
Yeah.
live, I can think. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Life is good.
That's awesome. I love
So
it.
yes, I did actually in 2020. It was the senior year of my youngest, and they graduated. And in on August 3rd, 2020 is my new life day. I celebrate it every year. It is the day that I drove a U-Haul away from my home in the suburbs and moved back home to Maine.
Mm.
I was in Connecticut. And so I drove back home to Maine and lived in Portland and, began my new life. And it was terrifying and it was exhilarating. And I didn't even know how to occupy space. I had apartment to myself. I furnished it completely with everything that brought me joy. And I felt like, wait, I'm allowed to like make noise and put my feet on the furniture if I want and like eat,
Mhm.
just eat what I want. And it was just so strange and so beautiful and so scary. But that transition was very important for me. And so I've been living in Maine since 2020, and I have found love,
Mm.
the love of a woman who is phenomenal. She is all that and a bag of chips.
Love it.
Yeah.
I just can't get enough of her. And we were standing in her kitchen late last year, and it just occurred to me, it struck me that I wanted to grow old with her.
Mm.
Oh,
And that was the first time that I had ever thought that I wanted to grow old.
Oh,
And it was a
I
beautiful
love
moment,
that.
and I just treasure her so much. She adds so much to my life, and I just am so, so lucky to have her.
that's
I love
amazing.
that.
But as far as the book promotions go, I'm getting great reception here in Maine and also in the Ex-Mormon community. The TikToks are going great. I just started those a couple weeks ago, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback. And somebody even stitched me, so that was kind of fun.
Hey.
But I have a website that is jam-packed full of info about me and also my continuing thoughts on subjects about the church and about my leaving and about my deconstruction and my healing. And so I have a blog where I soapbox regularly and weekly, if I can, and try to keep the conversation going. I enjoy being part of the national conversation about the worldwide conversation about the intersection between religion and LGBTQ issues. I think we need to talk more about it in our families, in our religions, in our communities, and it's only going to foster ignorance if we don't talk about it.
Absolutely. And it's that's where the um, being visual helps, because I think it's one of those corny little commercials that pop up sometimes, but it'll have someone, a famous person doing something, and it has a tagline of, if you can see her, you can be her, you
Oh
know.
yes,
And I like that, just because it's being able to see it allows others to be their true selves as well. So,
yes.
what is your website? Do you mind plugging it?
It's chrisdavisproud.com.
Oh, okay.
Chris
Okay.
CHRIS. I just restructured it just a little bit. I included my Instagram feed on there, as well as appearances, local appearances that I'm doing, and book signings. And it also has a list of other podcasts and radio shows that I've been on. So and like newspaper articles and stuff. So it's got it all there. I'm really tooting my own horn, which is so hard to do, but I'm
No, you
figuring it out.
should. You should absolutely toot your own horn. I wanted that, and I hadn't been on your website yet, so I'm excited to check that out as well.
Oh, good. Thanks. And there are links to buy the book.
You need to come do a book signing in Ohio.
Okay.
Or Washington State. That's
All
fine.
right. All
Yeah.
right. I'm in. I'm up for it. Yeah. Let's do it. I just had a member of the deaf queer community reach out to
Oh,
me,
cool. Mhm.
and we are working on an event that will have an interpreter so
Love it.
that I can talk about my book and reach the deaf community, which I'm so excited about. I
Yeah.
I'm a baby signer, and so I'm still learning how to do that. But I'm really excited to reach out to that niche community and just bring the hopefulness and bring the empowerment that comes along with the message. I've had a few people ask me about an audiobook.
Yeah.
I have not recorded an audiobook yet. I do have the intention of doing it. My publisher uh, advises against my reading it myself because I'm not a professional voice actor and it will cost a lot more in edits. Um, However, I think that there are things in the book that no one else can read the way I
Mhm.
would. Inflections, pronunciations of places in Maine, the CB talking that my brother and I do. I love you,
Yeah.
bud. You
I
know,
love that.
what's your 1020?
I
Just
love
I don't think another reader is going to do that, and so I need
Yeah.
to do it. However, I can't do it yet because I still can't read through the book out loud without crying.
Yeah.
mm,
Well, that's
Work up
there's
to that.
something very touching about the author reading the book. I listen to a lot of audiobooks because like I said, when I sit down to read, I fall asleep. But if I'm driving and or walking or something and I listen to audiobooks, I love them.
yeah, same.
But
Same.
I had listened to most audiobooks that I listen to doesn't have the author reading it. But I listened to that one, I think it's called I'm Glad My Mother's Dead or something
Yeah,
like that.
Mm,
It was
yeah.
the girl that played on
Jeanette McCurdy. Yeah,
yeah, that book was amazing. And
it was.
she read it herself. And there were a couple times that she did get emotional, but I felt like that added to it. It
mm.
added to the weight of like you could feel what it felt to be in that situation.
It's a
So I
different
think that
experience.
adds to it when
Thank you.
the author reads the book.
Did
Yeah.
you listen to Bad Mormon by Heather Gay?
Yes. Yes.
Uh-uh.
That one was amazing too.
Okay, I actually recited the temple ceremony with her while she was revealing it in the
Right?
audiobook. Yes.
I
Oh
loved
my
that she did that.
I love it too. I mean, so sacrilegious, but I ate it up. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah, there was a lot of things that she did that I was like, I'm so like, I love that she kept that in there, and yeah, a lot of it can be very offensive, but that's it's that was her experience, and you're allowed to talk about your experience, even if it offends someone else.
Yes, yes, we are. We're allowed to speak our truth.
Yep,
there any other parts of your book that you want to share?
yeah,
Uh,
or parts of your story, or
Huh.
oh, I didn't talk about my mission at all,
oh
Oh,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
in my book. I served in California, and the sisters made up 10% of the body of the mission. The elders were there were 200 missionaries, and 20 of us were women.
mm,
My mission president was misogynistic, and distant and judgmental and just into numbers. Get the numbers, flirt to convert, do what you have to do, sisters,
yeah,
to get the baptisms. And at one point, I was probably halfway into my mission, and he was talking to a friend of mine who was in my apartment, who was another missionary, and he told her that the sisters in his mission were more trouble than they were worth, and that if he had his way, he would send us all home.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so I encountered a lot of misogyny and a lot of just inappropriate and inequitable treatment of the women in the mission field, and I just did not expect that. I still had the blinders on when I left for my mission, and I wanted to serve Heavenly Father and just give everything that I had to a cause that I believed in. And I got out there and discovered the just the structure was not what I thought it was, and the practice was not what I thought it was. And I kind of saw behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz,
yeah.
Hmm.
and it completely destroyed my testimony. And so I had to make a choice. I had to make a decision. And against the mission rules, I called my mother and I said, Mom, this is all bullshit. Like, it is not what they promised it would be. I don't want to do this. Can I please come home? And this was only a few months into my mission. And she convinced me to stay because she said it would be an embarrassment if I came home
Mhm.
early, and that I would regret it for the rest of my life. And who knows, I may have if I hadn't seen it through to the end. And I held on to that and I embraced it and I recommitted myself and reconverted myself during my mission, despite the negative messages that I was receiving as a woman in
Mm.
the mission field.
I loved the part of your book where you talked about you had told off, I think it was your zone leader, maybe, or something like that.
It was a
That
bishop in one of the wards.
I love that where you're like, you don't have authority over me or
Yeah,
something
he
like
was threatening to, if I didn't continue to coming to the priesthood executive committee meeting on Sunday mornings, that he was going to tell my zone leaders on me to get me to comply. And I just said, those boys have no authority over me.
Good.
Yeah, but I saw the underbelly and it stunk.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
It
well,
was hard. It was
so
hard.
Yes.
I feel like, clearly, I think, and now that I'm out of the church, I see that this is so obvious that the whole, highly encouraging missions and making, saying it's required for young men and encouraged for young women. And it's just a way, like, that age is such an impressionable age. Most of these missionaries, I think, don't want to go, but they go because it's expected of them and their parents expected of them. And
Mm-hmm.
and while they're on their mission, it's either they fully convert themselves, they've just given away 2 years of their life. So they're committing their whole life to the church. And it's a way to just make sure that they're 100% in as adults. And then once you,
Yes.
get off your mission and you're in the church, you want to, that couldn't have been a waste. So you just stay in the church and hold on. And
Right.
Yep.
You're on the track. You're on the fast track at that point.
so I think so often the missions are not about converting other people. It's about converting the
Mm-hmm.
missionaries.
Yep. I was thinking the same.
Absolutely. And it's presented as we want to train our future leaders of the church, that kind of thing, but really it's definitely a brainwashing technique where you are not exposed to anything but the church for a year and a half or 2
Yeah.
years depending on how long you serve, but
Yeah.
it's definitely brainwashing technique. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read in my quest for truth, when I started looking at outside sources, I read the book Combating Cult Mind Control by
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Hassan.
Yeah.
And I still had kind of a semi open mind, about the church and was just curious. And one of the chapters is kind of all about the church, our church.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was so disturbed to discover that this was written by a man who used to be one of the Moonies. And I was so disturbed to discover that I had played the role of a cult recruiter as a missionary.
Yep.
That threw me for a loop. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what made me leave the church. Finally, what put me over the edge was a video that I saw of a by Infants on Thrones. It
Mm.
was a montage of children in front of temples around the world, and it was playing the song Creep by Radiohead. And it kept repeating in the song, "What, what am I doing here? I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
This is not," and it was saying
Oh,
things like, there are no queer members, gay members of the church, like by Bednar, and just showing quotes,
wow.
so-called intellectuals, so-called homosexuals, so-called same-sex attraction, and just quotes from conference that were things that I knew I had heard before, but I never saw them in that context. And it just made me think, you don't belong here. What
Mm-hmm.
the hell are you doing here? You
Yeah.
need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I read a book.
Yes.
It wasn't that same book. And I, of course, I forget what it was called and I forget the author. But I know she had pulled a lot from that book, and she was talking about the different aspects of a cult. And
The bite model.
she,
Yep. The bite
yeah,
model.
and she added, she put every line like this is what Mormonism does, and then there's this, and it's like 31 different things of cult, and all
Mm-hmm.
of it was what Mormons did too. I wish I could remember the name of that book. It has a temple on the front and it's like shooting light out of it. I totally forget, but it was really, really good.
It wasn't a Martha Beck book, was it?
No,
No, okay,
Mm.
because that
no,
sounds like the cover of one of her books, but no.
no. This one, I know that oh gosh, I'm going to have to figure it out. I know that she
I'd
was
like to hear.
on,
I'd like to know.
yeah, I know she was on Mormon Stories, and that's where I heard of her and her book. And then I got the book, and it was, that was right as I was deconstructing at first, and it was very helpful. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's right
all
in your
these years I
face.
was actually in a cult. That's good to
Mm-hmm.
know.
It's disturbing, isn't it? Because nobody thinks they're in a cult.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
my middle son, actually, as I was kind of PMO in the church. I He actually brought out the bite model,
Oh, to
and
you.
he yeah, yeah, and he's like, just read this, just read the, all
Wow.
the points of the bite model. And I was reading it, and we had a really interesting discussion about it, but I found myself still trying to defend the church at that time, um, and and justify teachings in the church and things like that. But as we had that conversation, that was one of the most pivotal conversations that I've had to help me out of the church. So I really credit my kids for saving me. I credit
Awesome.
my kids for saving me from the church. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have been a little bit concerned about the kind of reception that I would get from the public on this book. It just came out in April, and so it was just before Pride, and so it really dovetailed well into Pride Month. But then there's the lingering, and so I have received an amazing outpouring of compassion from the ex-Mormon
Mm,
community, as well as from other parents who are parenting queer children and have this dilemma about, you know, church. Um, but I did have a current believing member of the church approach me.
mm,
I work in a bookstore, and they, of course, are very good about prominently displaying my book. And she had never heard of the book before she walked into the store. She saw the cover of my book, saw the word ex-Mormon and lesbian, and she came looking for me.
mm,
And she told me, I know, what a big ally she was. She gave me a big hug. She smiled. She talked my language like she did the BRT, to build a relationship of trust that we're taught as
mhm.
missionaries to do.
Yep.
And then we went to another part of the store where my coworkers weren't, and she called me out. And she defended the church. She said that things were getting so much better for queer people in the church, which I don't have any evidence of that.
No.
But she wanted to make sure that I understood I was wrong, and she had zero interest in hearing what was inside my book,
Mm,
and just stonewalled me on that. And actually, I was trying to tell her about one of the endorsements that's in the front of my book from a current believing member of the church who is a friend of mine, and how this friend of mine, um, gave an endorsement of the book, a high endorsement, but then also said that she said it motivated her to want to do better.
mm.
And I wanted to send this message to this woman, and she would not hear it.
Wow.
It was devastating. It was really hard to hear that. And I fault myself because I opened myself up. I made myself vulnerable to her because she spoke my language, and
Yeah.
then she used it against me. It was painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so often, members of the church will say, well, it's getting better. It's getting more, tolerant of gays. Whereas, I think you even, yeah, right.
Sorry.
I think you might have even put it in your book how it used to be like a sin to even have the attraction, but now it's not a sin to have the attraction. It's just a sin to act on it.
So, Chris, I just want to say, I think the most the one of the best mental health things that I've done for myself is read the book, the Four Agreements.
Yes.
When you're talking about this woman who came to you and used the BRT and spoke your language to gain your trust and then tore you down afterwards. I just want to say that that's not about you.
Mm,
Yeah.
That's about her.
thank you.
That's her internalized cognitive dissonance. That's her fear. That's her insecurity. And that you being so open and being able to tell your story, breaking your silence, and being able to share what has happened with you to the world is uncomfortable for her.
Mm,
She's not able to say those words to you because she doesn't understand herself, but it's not about you. And just
Yeah.
keep doing what you're doing because you are touching more lives and actually opening up more questions for people like her, where she's going to regret doing what she did,
Yeah.
coming to you and telling you the things that she said. I go back and I can't remember all of my, conversations when I was Mormon, but there are a lot of things that I know that I've said, or, rejections that I've made. Um, and I believe that I'm a really very empathetic and compassionate person. And looking back at those is very hard. Um, and I think that you've done that. And she's maybe on the fence of it. The fact that she even came to talk to you, to build that relationship of trust, to tell you how she was feeling, those thoughts and feelings are not her, they're the church.
Yeah.
And as she starts to realize, I don't really agree with what I just said, maybe then she's going to start saying, yeah, I've said and done a lot of things in the name of Mormonism
Mm-hmm.
that I don't really agree with.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. We say Mormons got a Mormon, right?
Yeah.
We do.
They do.
And I am actually working on another piece of writing, and I'm going to include some of my examples of when I did that to other
Yeah.
people as well.
Yeah.
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 And that's something, that we've all done. And I want to say it's an episode that I actually recently recorded. It hasn't been released yet. That guest talks about how there were times that she would say things and she said it didn't even feel like me saying it. It
Oh,
felt like a robot,
yes. Yep.
just regurgitating what I was
Repeating.
told that I need to say.
Oh, we've
Yeah.
all
And
done that.
that's so true. And that's, that sounds a lot like what happened there, and
Yeah,
it's,
because we're taught to identify as this persecuted minority. And so anything that's said against us is attacking us and is attacking God and is attacking the institution, and we feel compelled to defend it.
yeah,
An interesting pattern, I think, that I've noticed also is that as Mormons, we have all the answers. We're really uncomfortable not having the answers. And so, and honestly, that's dangerous, because instead of finding the answers, we double down and we um, say things like, well, I have a testimony of it.
Yes, which is supposed to shut
Well,
down any argument.
right. And it does. It effectively shuts down the other person because there's nothing they can say to that. I have a testimony. I've received an answer from the Holy Ghost. Regardless of whether or not you have, as a member of the church, that's the answer. And it actually stops us from growing.
yeah,
It
Ooh,
stops us from actually reevaluating our own thoughts and beliefs and behaviors. So we're not able to get uncomfortable with ourselves. We're not able to get uncomfortable with other people because we just say what needs to stop the conversation, so we're not given information or given thoughts from people that might jeopardize our own testimony.
wow. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And also wait, I wrote it down. Uh, this new not knowing
Mm-hmm.
is so scary in the beginning, but I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I've come to a place where I am quite comfortable with the
Mm-hmm.
idea of not knowing, because I
Yeah.
know nobody else knows either. It's not like I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to play catch up and study harder and like learn all the
Yeah.
truth. There is no information on this, like what
Yeah.
happens after we die, or
Mm-hmm.
what what the meaning of life is. Like I decide that, or I decide not to decide that. I
Yeah.
really feel so much more peace in that.
Yeah. Uncertainty. Yeah. With uncertainty, everything is possible. Anything is possible.
yeah.
But with
That
the
was one of the, I'm
go ahead.
sorry. That
No.
was one of the biggest things for me in leaving the church was learning to live in the gray area
Yeah.
because we spent so much of our life black and white, right and wrong.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's miles of gray area in there that you just don't know. And that's, that faith crisis that happens for a week or two. But then once you get through the crisis, it's that faith journey.
Wait,
And
yours
that
only
journey
lasted a
never
week or two?
ends. Well, I mean, I think, well, there's the crisis portion, and the crisis can't last very long, but but once you're more comfortable with it, you move through, and you learn to live in that gray area. You learn to live without knowing, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
Before our, like our patriarchal blessings lay out our life, you're going to get married, you're in the temple to someone of the opposite sex, because
Hmm.
I don't think they've ever said, hey, in a patriarchal blessing, you know what, you're gay, you're not going to get married in the temple, you're not going to, I don't think that's ever happened. But
Can
could you
you
imagine?
imagine?
Yeah, that'd be great. They spell out, you're going to get married to someone of the opposite sex in the temple. They're going to be a faithful member. You're going to raise happy, faithful kids as and then you're going to grow old, and then you're going to die, and you're going to go to heaven. And it's a prescribed thing for everyone. But there's such a comfort living in, it's okay. It's not knowing. It's okay to not know, and just doing what you feel is right for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's part of a rebirth. It's part of a rediscovery of who we are. It's
Yeah.
part of a quest for self acceptance, and also grace for ourselves and
Mm.
for other people. This is my new word that I'm working on, grace.
Grace.
It's
Yeah.
not a concept that we learn in the church. We're
No.
taught that grace is after all we can do, that's that little edge that is
Hmm.
Jesus is going to help us get into heaven, but we
Yeah.
never ever taught to have grace for ourselves, and
Right.
I dig it. I like the idea. I love the concept.
Yeah, and that's when you get into, there's so much perfection expected in the church, and like you said, it's after all I can do, then Jesus picks up the rest. But then you're always like, I could have done better, I could have done more,
Yes,
I could have,
the
like,
perfectionism,
but and
Yep.
then you get into the
Scrupulosity.
perfectionism, the scrupulosity,
scrupulosity.
it's,
Hmm.
and that's dangerous too. And I think I had said in my episode, or in ones that I've hosted before, how much um once I lost my faith and left the church, I was amazed to realize I didn't feel guilty anymore. And I realized that I
Yes.
had
That's
felt guilty.
amazing, right?
Right. I had felt guilty from the time I could feel guilt
Yep.
all the way until I was 38 years old.
Hmm.
And then
Yes.
suddenly I didn't have guilt anymore. It's
Yeah.
like
And the absence of it.
I still do stupid things, but then I learn from them. And it's not like I don't feel guilty for the stupid things I do. It's just stupid things.
You
It's
don't beat
because I'm
yourself up.
right. It's
Hmm.
because I'm 40 and just now learning how to be a human. That's.
That I address that too in the book. I say
Yeah,
I have felt so elite and special and unique my whole life, and I am just thrilled with this idea of joining the human race and
right.
being like everybody else. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and
Hmm.
I can appreciate the beauty of imperfections in human beings, and I love
Yep.
it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
including myself.
Yeah. Um, Maddie Zom, she's a singer that I really, really like. She was on American
Yes.
Idol once. She recently received, or she releases a lot of songs about faith journeys, because while she wasn't Mormon, she was um, heavily into her Christian religion that she grew up in, and she's deconstructing from that. And she recently released a song that said, "Where do all the good kids go?" And it talks
Mm.
about how she was like a good kid her whole life. Like, she was made a leader when she was a teenager, and she never got to be a kid. And so now
Mhm.
that she's an adult, she's learning how to be a kid again. She's
Uh-huh.
like, I don't know what to do now. Like, I never
Yes.
learned how to be an adult. And she talks about how she makes mistakes, and she got blackout drunk once because she didn't know when to stop, because she never learned, like, she was a good kid her whole life. Like,
Yes. Yes. Our
A good kid, right? In
right,
quotations.
right.
and and Kendra, you made the comment about infantilizing adults. Like we
Hmm.
do, our development is definitely stunted because we don't explore these things in our, teenage years or early 20s when everybody else is, experimenting and finding out who they are. We don't do that. We get married, we go on missions, we keep our blinders on. Mhm.
Yeah.
And then when we finally go to order coffee, we don't have the slightest
We
clue.
have no idea.
We feel
Or
stupid. I don't know
buy
what to order.
underwear.
Buy underwear.
Right?
Yes.
That was huge. Yeah.
I, I asked
I've,
for a
I've
drink at dinner the other night with some friends that I hadn't seen in a while, and they are not members of the church. But I was like, I'd like a Sex on the Beach, please. And they're like, what is this, 1983? I was like, I didn't get to experience these, and this brings me joy. So
Right.
back
So
off.
live with it.
yeah,
Right.
seriously. Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, a thought that came to mind with what we were talking about with you know, the person that came to you in the bookstore. It made me think of also the thing that I brought up earlier about having all the answers. That we when we believe we have all the answers and we shut it down with a testimony, it's kind of like, so I use medical references because that's what I know. Um, it's kind of like a doctor or a nurse coming into the room telling you a whole bunch of things about your health condition, but then you ask questions. They're like, oh, no, no, no. This is how it is because I have a testimony of it.
Yes, as if it's the fact.
I can't answer your questions, not because I don't know for myself, not because I haven't done the research, not because I don't understand your condition, but because I have a testimony of it, which shuts them down and makes them not able to, not that I would ever say that, but people ask questions to relieve uncertainty. In Mormonism, we bear our testimony to relieve uncertainty in ourselves.
Mm. It's like testimony meeting where we convert each other
Mm-hmm.
every month, right?
Yeah.
We say that the things that we are taught are true so that we can receive a confirmation of it, and so that
Mm-hmm.
other people can receive a confirmation of it as well,
Yeah.
which is completely sentimentality. And I just am so embarrassed that I did that.
Yeah. Same.
I wanted to tell before we I want to make sure to fit this in that my oldest son, got married last year.
Oh,
He is still in the church.
oh,
He got married in Utah to an amazing young woman. She is phenomenal. She's great. I adore her. But their wedding ceremony was off limits to me. I was, of course, not permitted or invited to attend the ceremony, and I had to
Mhm.
wait outside on the manicured lawn to, see the couple emerge as a married couple, and that was difficult for me.
yeah.
But I before that day, I flew out to Utah a couple days before that, and there was a bridal shower, and it would have been the first time that I had seen or spoken to my ex in laws since coming
Mm.
out and since leaving my ex husband. And I was terrified. I wasn't sure how they were going to receive me, how they were going to react to me, how they were going to treat me. And although they're nice people, I understand that they are defending something that's very important to them. And so I was concerned. And I was talking with my the woman who is now my partner, uh, and on the phone on the way to the bridal shower, and I was like, "Gosh, I'm so scared." And she said, "You walk in that bridal shower like you own the motherfucking place." She said,
I
"You
love
hold your head up high, no shame, no embarrassment, no apologies, and they will follow your lead."
it. Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what happened. I think they wanted to embrace me, but they weren't sure how, and so I just gave them the confidence and the circumstances to be able to do that, and it turned out wonderfully. I received great support.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's excellent. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are good examples out there too.
Yeah. I love that. Um, one more thing that I had highlighted in your book, this story you were talking about, you had kind of talked about the Book of Mormon stories with the Zoramites and the Rameumptom and all for
Mm.
show and everything. But I loved this last paragraph in this chapter where you said Jesus focused on leaving the 99 sheep to rescue the one lost one. Where is our compassion for the lost sheep who've been hurt and marginalized? We have an opportunity to save them as they race down the slippery hill, and we can help them to avoid the violent, painful crash at the bottom by loving them into the fold and providing a safe place to land.
Mm.
And that's one thing, like in talking about the church, they don't offer that safe place. But like you say, we can, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we should be doing, is offer that safe place to the people that are left out and marginalized and need that help. I love that.
Your podcast is doing that. It is allowing people not only to speak their truth, but to hear other people's truth and to be welcomed into a supportive community that doesn't judge the way
Yep.
we've been accustomed to being judged. And it is so comforting. And I appreciate your efforts in that area.
I think just going back to that story, what was the part about falling down the hill or sliding down the hill?
Yes. I relate it to the earlier part of the chapter talks about this big hill in Bangor where I used to go when I was a kid, and we would like make this jump, and it was icy, and it was like exhilarating, and then we would crash at the bottom. It was painful, and it was just an analogy.
But I think there's further analogy to that in the church, our loved ones or the people that we went to church with, our community that we went to church with, I think they hope for this crash. I think they hope that we will crash. So
Yes.
because we've found a safe place to land, because we've found our voice, that's threatening. But they hope for the crash because the crash means vulnerability, and the crash means that they can come in and save us again.
And it justifies their position.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so
They don't
insightful.
It is so hard for them to see happiness and joy and that we're doing well and succeeding outside of this organization much better than we would have in it, and much better than a lot of people that still are in it. You know, that is so hard for them to see, and that's not what they want to see, because that does not affirm their decision to stay.
It doesn't confirm their bias, right?
Right, right. But I really am enjoying being a sinner.
Me
Me
too.
too. It's my
You know,
favorite thing ever.
It's my favorite too. Count me in.
I wear the badge of of apostate very proudly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
I love that you're speaking out. I love it.
it's good. It's a good platform.
It
Yeah.
is.
Well, alrighty. Did we have more that we wanted to touch base on?
I think that was everything I was hoping to cover, but I'm happy to answer more questions if you have them, but I'm good.
I think I'm good. Before I stop recording, I do want to say I want to tell everyone, go buy this book, Worthy, the Memoir of an Ex-Mormon Lesbian, and visit the website chrisdavisproud.com. I think it's healing for anyone within their faith journey. It's fantastic. So thank you again, Chris, for being here.
Thank
You've
you
been
so much.
amazing,
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
for sure. And thank you, Kendra, for being on.
Yeah. I'm excited to get started again. I've been in the process of moving and everything too. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming on,
Thank you.
giving us more motivation to see more people and interview more people.
Yes, keep going.
Thank you for joining us on Latter-day Survivors. As survivors of trauma and abuse, we wanted to provide a platform for survivors to share their stories. Many survivors of all types of abuse may be able to recognize and relate to the patterns of behavior in the victims, abusers, families, and friends of the stories shared by other survivors on this podcast. Often, as we escape oppressive family, religious, and social constructs to a safer place where we come to see our abuse and all related issues, we are better able to process and begin to heal. We believe that when we share our stories with others, we can also help them to heal. It can take decades for survivors to find the courage to speak about these things. If it is so hard for adults, imagine how difficult it is for a child to speak up. We hope to normalize these discussions so that children can speak to adults earlier. As adults, we must listen and recognize the severity of the abuse, its potential consequences, and the need for action to stop the abuse as early as possible. Just knowing we are not alone, that there are other people who have felt and do feel the same or have endured similar experiences in life, can remind us that we are not alone in this.
Oh, my child, I fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. All your life you've tried to be a good man inside. Did everything that you thought you should. Didn't seem to do you any good. I know you've tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your